Hey guys, happy Tuesday. In today's video, I'd like to share with you my overall perspective with the markets. Where are we headed with Bitcoin price? We'll also be talking about latest updates from two Bitcoin miners, that is CleanSpark and Riot Platforms. In fact, both companies announced their production data. We actually had Riot provide their earnings report Q2 last week, and CleanSpark will be announcing their information this week on Thursday. So there's lots to come, so much excitement. Now, if you're new to this channel, first off, I would really appreciate you hitting the like, subscribing for more related content, and we'll also be doing technical analysis, price predictions of Bitcoin, CleanSpark, and Riot. Let's begin, guys. Let's first off take a look at this post from Crypto Elites. So one Bitcoin is equal to 190,000. Anyone out there still doubting? We're getting there very soon. So Crypto Elites has a forecast in this year. We're headed to that 190,000 range, and that sounds very reasonable. I mean, Tom Lee's saying we're going to get to 200, 250,000. We know there's going to be that huge psychological barrier, but it'll be interesting to see where we head. We're still in the Bitcoin bull market, and there's so much upside. It's getting boring with Bitcoin, and we know for every cycle, relative strength index on the monthly RSI tends to go 80 plus RSI on multiple months, and we haven't even got there yet. Chicken Genius posted, markets will keep climbing the ladder, front running the obvious rate cuts. As far as I remember, anything above 80% probability has a 99% chance it will happen. So we're looking at Holly market just with the overall probability, come September, is the Fed going to have rate cuts in the month of, September, which is next month. So now it's at 92%. This is very bullish. As soon as we have FFR rates going down, stock market and crypto is going to have a nice comeback. Eric Trump, said that Bitcoin is going to have explosive growth soon. The best days of Bitcoin are ahead. We're not bullish enough. In fact, even Trump announced in 6 months, we're going to have a big roaring to the economy. And this is going to be very bullish for the stock market as well as Bitcoin. CleanSpark announced production numbers today, but let's take a look. I mean, Bitcoin produced in the month of July. Again, this is during the hot summer season, 671 Bitcoins. I mean, they have a total Bitcoin holdings at the end of July, 12,703, with an operational hash rate of 50 exahash. In fact, they're bolstering up their exahash target end of year to even ramp that up further. But they have a power under contract of 1.03 gigawatts. That's huge numbers, as well as their operational fleet efficiency getting close to, sub 16. Eventually it'll be like high 15s joules per terahash. Only Iron has, better numbers when it comes to fleet efficiency, and they're ramping up their hash rate to the levels where they're gonna, get close to tomorrow's hash rate. So Zach, announced July was a strong month for both Bitcoin and CleanSpark, with Bitcoin reaching new all-time highs above 120,000. Our disciplined accumulation strategy was validated as our treasury grew to over 12,700 self-mined Bitcoin. Importantly, we continue to self-fund our operations through strategic Bitcoin sales, enabling ongoing accumulation while avoiding any use of equity financing or shareholder dilution. At the same time, CleanSpark's total contracted power surpassed 1 gigawatt, a significant achievement that reflects the scalability of our infrastructure first approach. While a heat wave in the southeast led to periodic load reductions in response to heightened grid demand across several regions, our flexible power agreements and geographically diversified footprint proved their strategic value. Our ability to support utility partners during periods of peak demand highlights the increasingly important role Bitcoin mining can play in grid stability. This mutually beneficial relationship has enabled us to secure over 1 gigawatt of power across 4 states, and we are well positioned for further expansion. As we continue to grow, our focus remains on delivering durable shareholder value through scale, operational efficiency, and long-term profitability. So very bullish with the amount of Bitcoin that they were able to mine, especially on top of the heat wave that took place. And that's why they really, reduced risk by diversifying their facilities, not only in areas of like Georgia, but they, expanded outward. And this really helps them, increase their hash rate, follow that same blueprint, and scale up their operations as a pure Bitcoin miner play. But one of the key things is, preventing shareholder dilution. Let's say if share price shoots up to $20, that's when they'll pull the ATM. But right now, investors are confident that there won't be any dilution given the fact that they are selling a portion of what they're mining each month. And that's a good thing. I mean, companies need to pay for their operations to be maintained. And for them to have a big hodl right now, this is looking very bullish, and we'll cover the technicals of CleanSpark as well. Bitcoin Treasury posts is just updates with the total hodl counts. We'll look at like the top companies that have a big hodl, but CleanSpark adds 95 Bitcoin to their treasury via mining, now holding, right below 13,000. So you see CleanSpark in ninth place right now. In fact, they bypassed Tesla, Coinbase, right behind Galaxy Digital, and you have Meta Planet, right in front of them. Riot Platforms, which we'll be covering, is, ranked number 5 right now at 19,239. But this is looking very bullish for the miners, just continuing to ramp up their HODL count, as well as just maintaining their cost expenditures by, selling the Bitcoin that they mine. Let's take a look at Fibonacci trading with his bullish post. He's saying this is where we want to see bulls step back in. Structure still intact with higher lows and higher highs. Now we've got to keep it that way to build toward $18 and $23. Holding $10 is key. Very consistent with my overall perspective. We'll also be covering that with my technicals that I'll be sharing as well. I mean, just looking at a deep dive, just with the data on the production metrics, we talked about 671 Bitcoins mined in July, but just look, peak single day Bitcoin production right at that barrier of like 24 Bitcoins. Think about it. Each day, each hour, they're mining, 1 Bitcoin for every hour, and their average daily Bitcoin production is, 21.65. In fact, once they ramp up that hash rate through the rest of the year, it's going to bypass that number, and their overall average, daily Bitcoin mining will be over 24 once they scale up their hash rate. So this is looking very bullish, as well as, improving their overall fleet efficiency, cost to mine. They're going to bring that down, as well as the amount of, Bitcoin that was sold, 575, that allowed for them to generate, $64 million from the sale of the Bitcoin, with an average price for the Bitcoin sold at $112,000, along with, just maximizing their power portfolio metrics, in the gigawatt levels. So this is looking very bullish with CleanSpark. Riot Platforms also announced their July production data. So Riot mined 484 Bitcoin in July, averaging 15.6 Bitcoin per day. The company maintained an efficient all-in power cost of 2.8 cents per kilowatt and expanded its footprint by acquiring an additional 238 acres near Riot's Corsicana facility. So, why did they buy additional land? So they did a feasibility study as they're focusing on developing their data HPC, approach. And by buying the additional land, this will give them the real estate to scale up their operations to become a data center platform. But just looking at their overall numbers, very nice consistency across the board when you compare July to June. With 484 Bitcoins produced with a hash rate of 35.5 exahash. Their goal is to get to like 40 exahash by end of year. And as we head into 2026, scaling up their hash rate to like 45 exahash in the early phase of 2025. Now Bitcoin held 19,287, all in power cost 2.8 cents per kilowatt. This is very bullish just in terms of the cost. I mean, anything below three is considered top line power costs, and that's the value of mining in Texas, and that's why they focus on Bitcoin mining in Texas facility because of the energy costs, along with just diving deeper in the data that is shared from Riot's announcement. They're not only focused on Bitcoin mining, but they also do have engineering service as well. In fact, they were able to strip off the risks, by acquiring, rhodium, which was part of Rockdale facility. So now with the additional hash that's available with the technology there as well, they may consider replacing, the older technology, using the later technology to increase their hash rate as well and build out that area for continuous Bitcoin mining. But when you compare the numbers with July to June, I mean, they've increased by about 8% month over month, ramping up the average Bitcoin produced per day. Now, slowly increasing their Bitcoin hodl, getting close to that, 20,000 Bitcoins. And they were able to, have net proceeds by selling a portion of the Bitcoin, at a higher cost, at 115,000. Their deployed hash rate remains the same. Operating hash rate, increased 30.2 exahash. Here's the unique thing though, when you look at the power credits from June to July, again, these are the hot month seasons. When you looked at it last year, there was extreme difficulty with Riot in terms of the Bitcoin mining, but they're demonstrating efficiency right now, even though they're switching off and on, because of the power credits. Let's say if the cost to mine energy throughout the day is much more expensive than the agreement cost, then they can, turn off the mining, accrue power credits. You see in this case 253% increase month over month, where they were able to generate, power credits of 3.8 million power credits in July. That factored like 4x, $12.6 million. So their total power credits has increased significantly, with all-in power costs, being extremely lower than June. And that's going to represent very solid numbers in Q3 already, just now that we've gone through the first month in July. So this is looking very bullish with this strategic play, especially during the seasonal, hot months in Texas, being able to leverage that power credits, really bring down the cost. And this really helps them to sell the energy back to, the service center so that, they can reduce that cost expenditure. Just looking at Riot Platforms, I mean, just with this post from Pop Charts, Riot Platforms looks bullish around here. So we did recognize that, that low point with the inverse head and shoulder. And it may just be that we have this right shoulder formation before we start running up. And this line is representing that it'll get up to like $18. So very bullish, and the technicals I think is going to play out just based on, just what we're seeing right now. And I'll go more into detail with my overall forecast. Let's take a look at Bitcoin technicals. So where we are right now with Bitcoin, we had a slight pullback, right? I mean, in fact, it got up to 123,000 relative strength at that time, July 14. It ramped up to like 76. That's not super high for Bitcoin. We've seen much higher, up in the 90s. It hasn't got to that level yet, but we saw a slight pullback, which is a good thing as we continue to see Bitcoin stabilize, continue to consolidate. We continue to see higher lows. It's hovering in this ascending channel. Key thing is Bitcoin price, the current price action right now is still hovering above the Ichimoku cloud. We want to continue to see that, and I really do think that we may very well see Bitcoin start, breaking out. I'm still bullish. We're going to see Bitcoin get to that 200,000 by, 2025, which I have drawn out here. But this is looking very bullish. RSI stabilizing, Ichimoku cloud price actions still hovering above that. You don't want to be below that. Otherwise, there will be that gravitational pull down. But just looking at where we are now compared to where we were before back in May, I mean, we started reaching, higher levels where we broke through the 110,000. That was like the prior resistance that happened in June as well. So where we are right now, establishing ground at 110,000, we'll take that as a win, flipping the resistance now to support before that next leg up. Let's take a look at CleanSpark technical analysis. So we continue to see higher lows from that, very ugly months of February, March, April, when we had just very bad economic, uncertainty with tariffs and all that. But we've seen nice movements up, higher lows, higher highs. In fact, it was bullish up until we got through mid-July when, CleanSpark got up to like 1373. It had a pullback, which isn't a significant pullback. But now, after today, in fact, CleanSpark, held up well. It was up by close to 2%. I had this drawn out previously, but I still remain bullish that, this is the support level, that psychological double-digit support level. The good news is that we didn't even get below this, this trend line. So that's what we want. We want the price action to stay above the Ichimoku cloud. The good news is RSI is in that normal state. It's not overbought. We had it, kind of go from like 72 down and have it stabilize. It's only going to be a matter before we're going to start seeing CleanSpark ramp up. I really do think the earnings report is going to, be very favorable for CleanSpark as well. And as Bitcoin price starts getting into price discovery phase, as we head into the rest of 2025, I really do think CleanSpark is going to have a nice run up as well. But on the near term, August, September, I'm very bullish that we're going to see CleanSpark get to that $18 level just based on what the technicals are telling us right now. Let's take a look at Riot Platforms. So Riot, continues to show upward motion from, the run up top, from like early November 2024. It just bled out, similar to CleanSpark as well, right? Where we saw a reversal with the miners along with stocks, since April 21st. So it's been climbing up, higher lows, higher highs. It was up until recently, I mean, July 24th, around that time of last week, including this week, we had a big pullback. I mean, it pulled back significantly from like $15, dropped down, today hovering at $11. It continued to go up towards the end of the market. However, one of the things is, that's expected just based on the relative strength. It was like an overbought situation. So technicals need to reset. But the good news is when you look at it from a day-to-day perspective right now, price action still hovering above the Ichimoku cloud. Good news is relative strength is now reset. Now, in fact, it's in that oversold position, 37. So I really do think that people are scooping up on the low cost price because it may very well just start shooting up, and we see that inverse head and shoulder formation. I have support drawn around that $10 psychological barrier. Key thing is we want to maintain price action staying above, this trend line. And I really do think, as we head into August, September, we may very well squeeze to like $20. And let's say Bitcoin goes to like 200,000, the sky's the limit with Riot Platforms. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed a deep dive analysis where we talked about Bitcoin. We talked about the markets as well as covered CleanSpark and Riot, going through technical analysis, price predictions. Let me know what you thought about this video, what your take is, what your price prediction is for, Bitcoin, CleanSpark, and Riot. Thanks for watching, guys.